everybody. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker and the host of this Halt and Catch Fire rewatch podcast. Now, when I speak, my topic is something that I call Take the Doughnut, which for me is another way to say carpe diem. It's all about going after the things that you want in life. Something that I wanted to do this year was rewatch the show Halt and Catch Fire, and this time talk about it with other people. Initially, the idea was to talk with fans of the show, and then I started doing interviews with cast and crew, and that was a blast. And it's still been a blast. I'm doing those every single week. And now we're up-leveling that even more because I'm getting a chance to talk with folks at the ATX TV Festival where there's a 10-year reunion for Halt and Catch Fire. And I am very pleased to share my next interview. Now, I just wanted to give a couple little caveats for this. I had the opportunity to speak with Toby Huss. Wow, what a moment and what an interview. And I'm so excited to share this with you, but I just wanted to caution you about one thing. So we were kind of bumping the table a lot as we were talking, and that is going to lead to a shaky camera. And please don't let that dissuade you from watching or at least listening to this interview, because we got to talk with Toby Huss and hear what he had to say about the show. I hope I could see that that we were shaking it while the interview was happening, but you don't tell Toby Huss not to put his elbows on the table. You don't do it. So I didn't. And I'm just gonna have to say I'm sorry for that to all of you, but my goodness, did he have some cool things to say about the show. And I hope that you can enjoy this interview and all that it brings for you. And I guess I should just say, with all of these interviews that I'm dropping from this festival, look, this isn't my normal process. I normally do these on Zoom. It's a much more controlled environment. When you're at a festival event as press, you're in a room with other interviews happening, other people coming in and out, lots of ambient noise, all kinds of weird lighting challenges, and you just have to make the best of it, because ultimately you want to talk about a show that you love and get a chance to talk with the people who made it. So I hope that you'll really enjoy all these interviews that I'm dropping, including this one with Toby Huss. And of course, beware. This is spoiler territory. If you haven't seen the show all the way through, we drop spoilers in pretty much all the interviews. So just know that up front. But all that said, please enjoy this interview with Toby Huss. Okay, everybody, it is Toby Huss, the John Bosworth.
Yeah.
In the flesh. For you on the screen, but for me in the flesh. The first question that I just have to ask this. I have heard from so many different people in my interviews that John Bosworth was one thing on the page before the pilot. And then kind of a completely different thing when you came into the room and sort of embodied him, and then became another thing altogether as the show went on.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how did you see John Bosworth, and did that change for you over time?
Well, it changed for me over time because those guys, they we talked about it a little bit earlier in the big, just a few minutes ago, an hour or so ago, we did a big panel of people, and there's always the question of, does the rider ride the horse, or does the horse take the rider where it wants to go? And that's sort of what we were doing with the show, where everybody, this is fantastic. There's a bunch of ladies in dresses running around here.
The Pretty Little Liars cast is filing out.
Oh, is it Pretty Little Liars cast?
Right now.
Oh, they're much more popular than. We should clear out for them. Let those girls have the room.
They're clearing out for you.
It was nice. There was a girl over there. There's windows over here on the other side, and there was a girl who was looking at the window right at me, and then she started going like this, and I went, "Oh, she's just fixing her makeup in a reflection." Did you see that? Just happened a second ago.
Oh my gosh. We'll focus it.
But back to Bosworth, it was a real collaboration where I think they saw what I did with the character, and they liked what I did with the character, so they started to write for that. But then it was all their invention of this guy Bosworth, and there was a lot of trust in what I could do, and I trusted everything that they wrote. I don't see anything they wrote that was a misstep in the whole show. It was just a real pleasure. So it was a real quid pro quo. It was not a quid pro quo really. It wasn't something for something. It was a real good back and forth. It was a real good combination of essential ideas as to who this guy was that were passed back and forth between us silently, and we figured him out.
Yeah. I guess playing off of that, Boz off screen goes to prison between seasons 1 and 2 and comes back. It feels like pretty changed. In what ways did you see him as changed?
The prison itself didn't change him at all. That's not the change that happened. The change was his embrace of this, his ability to embrace the new thing that was happening culturally in the world, embrace the new thing that was happening to him personally in business, and then to embrace how wounded that he really was. And he was destroyed by Joe and this thing. And Joe came in and was a real dirty bastard for Bosworth and blew up his whole idea of who he was. It was because of that he was able to embrace this change and to grow as a character, as a man.
I want to talk about Boz's relationship to a number of different characters, but we're on Joe right now, so I just find that relationship so interesting because obviously at the start of season 1, it's as contentious as it can be. He's threatened your entire livelihood, and and legally he's threatened life for you as well.
Yeah.
But you get to a point where by season 4, Boz wants to nurture Joe with a bowl of chili, and knows the only way that Joe will eat it at this point is to tell him, test this out for everybody else and make sure it's not too hot. It's such a, just from point to point, what a line you can draw between those. And,
beautiful.
What do you think about that relationship? Where did that relationship go?
It was a real parenting relationship because Joe didn't know how to really be a human in touch with his emotions in the world. He wasn't able to do that. And Bosworth was able to do it somewhat in the first season, but definitely by the second and third and fourth seasons, he was a man who was, because he was destroyed by this situation and by Joe, he was able to embrace this other side of life that he never would have embraced before. So he was looking at Joe kind of with an eye toward hoping that at some point Joe would be able to inhabit this emotional life that he had and, he could help Joe out in whatever way he could, knowing that Joe wouldn't really take what he was offering.
Yeah, it's interesting that you use the word father there because, it goes perfectly with a question that I was about to ask, but I never would have thought of that word for the relationship. Yeah. Let's talk about Boz and fatherhood.
And Cameron.
Yeah, there's Cameron, but you also in the show have a son.
Yeah.
And there is a point in season 2 where your son has asked Boz to work for this other company, his company, and it's getting him in rooms with higher ups, and you can see it in Boz's eyes at a certain point where it's like, oh, this isn't the life that I want. And he gets on a plane and goes to San Francisco with Cameron instead of his son.
Yeah.
And so, I just think that relationship to fatherhood is a really interesting one. How do you see Boz as a father in all the ways?
I think he was an absent father initially, and his son was of his own making, and it's a young Bosworth decision, that his son was making, and his son was following in his father's footsteps in a way, and Bosworth couldn't follow himself into the abyss again. He had to choose this life that he had with these other people, and it was full of life for him, and he couldn't choose the other way anymore. It was not open to him. Once you cross that line, you can't go back. There's no, and it's not because you don't want to go back or you think you shouldn't go back. You're physically unable to do this thing because it goes against you in so many ways, physically and emotionally, spiritually. And Bosworth had crossed that Rubicon in his own life, and he was done.
Yeah. So in that relationship with Cameron, which I think a lot of people would point to as being a fatherly relationship towards her, was that a do-over for him, or was that something else altogether?
It was. I don't think I never thought of it was like a do-over necessarily, but I think using this newfound idea of himself in the world, I think he was able to show a much greater amount of compassion and empathy for her than I think he did his own son. Definitely. Yeah, he was able to see something in himself through her and, in her through him and that sort of situation. I think it was maybe he was transposing or something. Maybe he transposed his son into Cameron or vice versa. But he was able to be more open finally as a father than he ever was before.
Yeah. I love the relationship between Boz and Diane. And, when it initially starts out, Boz is cautioning her about getting involved with him. And then by the end of the show, it's like the most stable relationship.
Yeah.
And like sort of the most aspirational relationship there is. What do you think makes Boz resist at first? And then what do you think draws them together?
I think he's an irascible bastard by nature. He's going to look at anybody in his face. Who the fuck are you? What's happening here? I need to kind of poke around in there to get to know you. And he does it aggressively in his own sort of subtle boss way. He's not horrible, but I think he needs to really get the measure of someone before he involves himself with them. And because especially based on the relationship with Joe, he's more cautious now than he was before, I think. Because before he could always be on top and be able to maneuver from a, place of real advantage, real entitlement. And he wasn't able to move like that with Cameron because he didn't want that. And he didn't want that with Diane either. Yeah.
So I've done a lot of interviews where people tell me their Toby Huss stories about the on-set experience. So I wanted to give you a chance to tell me your favorite on-set experience story.
I tell you, I thought about that. There's so many little things that were fun on set, but for me it was the idea in a whole. And I kind of talked about it before in the big panel, where I was aware from the first day of shooting that this was a different show. This wasn't like a lot of shows I've done, and something special was happening. And I told myself, you have to be really aware of this every day you're shooting. And every day you're shooting, this has to be the most important thing, and you have to remember that you can't take this seriously either, because it's so wonderful. So when I go on set, fucking around with the coders, that was really fun. These young guys on set, it was fun messing around with them. And I remember I had to do one scene where I had to. It was a big office scene, I think in season 2 probably, where it was the 4 of us in there, or the 5 of us in there, and there were some donuts in the middle of the table, and I just had a couple lines. But I remember grabbing a donut, eating the donut, and holding that donut and gesturing with the donut. And I think at one point, like, it was either Scoot or Carrie went like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, you have one line in this scene." I went, "No, I'm just having fun. This is fucking fun." And, gesturing with my donut. I wasn't trying to be too hammy, and I wasn't getting in the way of their lines. But it was me having fun, and I think every day I was up there, I wanted to have fun. I wanted to make it as emotionally charged and heavy as it needed to be, but I also wanted to have fun. So, yeah, that was part of the whole scene too for me.
Yeah. On screen, your character is basically somehow like a mediator between all these other like warring factions at various points. There's Donna and Cam and Joe and everybody. Like it just seems like somehow Boz is so grounded that he can kind of get in between and still be friends with everybody along the way. So what is it about Boz that makes him a good intermediary?
I think when you get, he was considerably older than them, older than I was. I think I started when I was 49 then or something, and I think Boz was supposed to be about 60. so he was older than those folks, and he'd been through a lot of the same wars that they were going through now, the personal wars and the actual wars in business, and he knew what was coming next, so he'd sit back and let it play out and kind of help someone along, and he was pretty wise in the ways of business and the way that people use business to destroy their relationships and use the business to make their relationships stronger or to not use it to make their relationships fuller. And he was having fun watching it play out. And when you don't feel the need to engage in that on a day-to-day basis, you can really sit back and listen to it and watch it sort of form its own thing, because it's its own living organism. And he didn't need to be he thought he needed to be in the middle of it in the beginning. And then once it took over, he went, oh shit, and was able to pull back and watch this thing, become its own animal, its own monster, its own pet, its own thing. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite scene that jumps out for you?
Yeah, there was one that we're going to get to today, but when Cameron and when Mackenzie and I are driving, and it's we're going by your father's place where they're selling the motorcycle, and yeah, that gets me choked up, that one still. That's a good one. Because that Mackenzie Davis is just such a heartfelt, good person, and then also a really great actress. And it was so fun to have some real meaty stuff with her that was really directly about, the relationship with Cameron and her own father and that situation. Yeah.
I'll ask you one more. So, obviously, you mentioned the coders that you worked with.
Yeah,
they've been talking about you.
They're great
They've been loving
knuckleheads,
it.
those guys.
And, there are a lot of really good stories about mentorship and how they felt about you as sort of a leader to them on set. Mm-hmm. How did you see your role as a leader on set, if you saw it that way at all?
Oh, I never saw myself like that, but I did see myself in these young guys that, a lot of them came up from Florida, and they didn't have any place to stay. They all rented a house together. They were available, and they were into it, and they brought such a life to the whole show. It was so great. And then to watch them, like to watch Cooper and Pupo and these guys and Randy Havens to go off and have these great careers, man. It's really wonderful to see these young guys go out and really kill it. It's so nice, and they were all. But it's a testament to them because they were all so into it and they were so committed and they cared about the show no less than I did. They cared about the show just as much as I did, and just as much as Lee Pace, and just as much as Scoot and Carrie. And Mackenzie. They cared about this show, man. And it was great to see that. So, but it was also kind of a special treat to watch just young guys go at it. I always got a kick out of that, watching just the dudes. My dudes go at it like that. They were great. They were really good.
That was my questions, but I wanted to give you an opportunity. Is there anything that you kind of wish would have been asked to you this weekend that you want to talk about from the show that you don't feel like has been mentioned before?
No, the one thing that came up in the round table there, the interview there, was that there was so much sort of that trust, that circular trust that the writers were letting us, without us trying, they were letting us inform them about the characters, and we were letting them inform us about how to play it and how to be these characters. And that circle continued from the first day to the last day. And it was such a testament to Chris and Chris that they hadn't done a show before, and they were so open to this whole thing. It was really a wonderful thing, and I haven't had anything like that since. It's been a human highlight, and it's been also a career highlight. And as far as how you want to spend your days creatively working with people, that's some of the best stuff I've ever done. Yeah.
Thank you so much for
You're welcome, yeah.
working on this show, for
Sure.
being at the ATX Festival, and
Yeah.
for doing this interview. This was
Sure.
amazing.
You're welcome. It's great. Good. Nice to meet you.